Okay, shalom and welcome back to Practical Parsha for Parshat Chukat or Chukas on page 402 in our books. Chukas is the Parsha that speaks about, at least for the first segment of the Parsha, about a very, very important and when I say important, I mean significant, but also important in terms of our lives and how we are meant to not only live our personal lives, but how we are meant to really help others and be there for others. And you'll hear that in a moment. Let's start first with the name of the Parsha. Chukas. What does the word chukas mean? So if we look in the first verses, it says, Hashem spoke to Moshe and Aaron, saying, this is the statute of the Torah. In Hebrew, that would be the word zot, chukas. Statute means chukas, ha-Torah, thus the name of the Parsha. Okay? This is the first unique identifier of this week's Parsha. Is not in the words God spoke to Moses or God spoke to Moses and Aaron, because that's very typical and very common. When it says zot, it's also a very common word. But chukat is already something unique. It's a unique identifier. Thus, our Parsha acquires the name, the title of Chukas, Chukat Torah. Let's first understand what it means when we say this is the statute of the Torah. And then we'll talk about what the statute is. So to be sure, we have three types of mitzvot. Okay, you can break the mitzvot down in three categories. There are the mitzvot that go under the title, under the flag of mishpatim. Mishpatim mean what? It comes from the word mishpat, which means justice. The word justice comes from the word just. It's justified. It makes sense. Something that is just means that it sits well in the human mind. Okay, that's really what justice is. Okay? And Mishpatim includes all the mitzvot that, in fact, the Talmud points out that even many of them, perhaps even most of them, had the Torah, God forbid, not been given, we would have been able to reach almost the very same conclusions on our own. In other words, the typical decent human being, decent moral human being, could understand, not only could understand, but does understand, can wrap their minds around all these laws, such as not to steal, not to kill, if you owe someone money to pay back, if someone doesn't want to pay back, what the courts do in order to collect the money, all these types of laws that, if you damage someone, you make someone lose money, how you have to pay back, what you're liable for, all these things are justified laws. These are laws that the human being could very well understand. A second tier is called Eidut. Eidut are those laws that are testimonials. The laws that correspond to certain events, for example, Passover, Sukkot. The Torah instructs us, God instructs us to commemorate a certain event by doing this or by doing such and so on. Thus, it's already a step above the Mishpatim in terms of it's more divine, certainly more divine, but still understood. Why is that? Because although the human being would have never have reached these conclusions on his or her own, however, once the Torah has mandated it, we can relate to it, we can understand it, we can accept it with relative ease. When I say relative to the other level, which is almost absolutely not understood. It makes sense. The Jews went out of Egypt, they ate the matzah, they did this, we do that to commemorate. Why do we commemorate? To remember it, to relive it, to learn the lessons of it. It fits in to our understanding. Kosher laws are not in that category. Not at all.
No.
The next level, which is, you could say, the highest level, And the reason why I say it's the highest level, not that the other one is less Torah in any way, but it does require a much higher level of obedience. Being that the human mind does not really understand it. The human mind really does not wrap itself around it. And the fact is that the way we are wired, we're talking about a normal, healthy human being, is when we don't understand something, it doesn't make sense to us, we have to either submit ourselves to it, or we don't do it. Okay? Even, for example, anybody here has experienced it in some way or another, hopefully never ever in a very severe circumstance. When you go to a doctor, he or she tells you to do this, so I'm going to give you an injection, or take this medication. True, I have no idea. I may have no clue, and I may not ever find out, because I may not have just the capacity to do so, how that particular medication will help me, how the injection is going to help me, why do I have to go through this pain, and so on and so forth. I may even go for a second opinion. But the fact is that when two doctors tell me the same thing, what happens now? I accept that they do know what they're talking about. I submit myself, and therefore I am comfortable with it. Am I excited that I have to, God forbid, take a surgery? So no. That I have to take this bitter pill? No. But I am confident that since the doctors did go to school and they do have the experience they have, and they're telling me to do so, although I have no clue what's going on, but I know that somewhere out there there's an understanding of it. Somebody understands this concept, somebody really studied it, and therefore is making these conclusions, is reaching these decisions, and therefore I'm okay with it.
Is that faith or not?
See, that's the thing. It's not really absolute. Yeah, you're having faith in the doctor. You're having faith in the doctor. At a certain level it is faith, but it is also at a certain level you can say it's even, and I don't want to get too mystical here, but in mysticism we learn that even this category of mitzvot, which I haven't even completed describing, you still have a level somewhat of understanding. You understand that the doctor knows what he or she is talking about. So therefore you have faith. So it's not pure faith in the fullest sense of the word, but still it's you going out and you're just trusting that person. Okay? And the fact is, imagine that very same doctor who you trusted today, tomorrow you open a newspaper and it says that the doctor's credentials were false, they were fabricated, and the diploma you saw on the wall was not from Harvard,
it's a phony.
From Kinko's. Okay? Automatically, what happens? Your faith drops right there, right?
Indeed.
Now I ask you, did anything change in your understanding of this medical procedure? No. And it could very well be that doctor was saying the correct thing. He was just a genius. He studied all the medical books and he knows what he's talking about. So it's obvious that you're submitting yourself not blindly. You're submitting yourself knowing that this doctor, you're trusting that they know what they're talking about because of their credentials, because of their experience, and therefore you're ready to submit yourself. But if I ask you, does it make sense to you? No, it doesn't make sense to you. And guess what? It doesn't have to make sense to you. See, but that's not the best example because we all understand in the context of the example that I'm giving is that it's not pure faith. It's not pure faith. Okay? So there are other better examples for it, but I just wanted to give you an idea. So these are the mitzvot. Chukim are statutes. In the terminology of the Midrash, quote, these are the decrees of the king, and you have no business, you have no permission to even second guess it, to even think about it, to contemplate it. Meaning, don't even try. There is no explanation. Not because there is no explanation, but on a human level, regardless of how great of a human you are, there is no explanation that the human mind could really fully understand. Perhaps there are some ideas that we can relate to. And even going back to the analogy that I gave. If you walk out of the doctor's office, someone says to you, "You're going to do what the doctor said?" You say, "Well, yes." Why? Well, I saw that the credentials the doctor has and the years of experience And he has a nice, beautiful white coat, and he's got a whole crew of nurses and PAs.
And 4 pens.
What are you talking about?
4 pens in the
How
pocket.
about if I tell you the doctor has a gambling problem and he needs the money? That's why. That's his motivation. Right? You still may not cancel that. Unless you're really, really, really sensitive to fear. You know what I mean? Unless you're really, really... You won't be so apprehensive, even though there's always a chance that maybe the doctor has another agenda. But since overall you're comfortable, there's a doctor, he knows what he's talking about. Again, you got the second opinion. There's no reason for me to think that both doctors had an agenda and each one wants to mess up my life, and together they somehow, by osmosis, they collaborated in order to mess up my life. What I'm trying to say is that even when there is somewhat, I want to say some rational room for doubt, but you accept it, you submit yourself, right? These laws that fit into this category are actually some of the most fundamental mitzvot in the most common observance of Judaism. Is actually where they appear the most. And that's why Jews actually are a funny people. And we're so misunderstood. And quite frankly, very unappreciated, and even more, at best, at worst, we have enemies. Because really, they look at us as a crazy people. On the one hand, we are meant to be the smartest people. And the Torah says it. Because we are Am, Chacham, V'Navon, a wise and understanding people. And yet, on the other hand, some of the most important observances and the most common ones that are the staple of Judaism, it's the hallmark of what a Jew is, are in this category where, hey, you ain't going to understand this. Not only you ain't going to understand it because you didn't try hard enough. No matter how hard you try, and no matter how much you do understand, that's not the ultimate reason. That's just enough to sugarcoat it, so to speak. To help you somehow get by and feel like you understood something. To give you a classical example, the laws of kashrut, the kosher laws, kosher food. What exactly is the difference between this piece of meat and that piece of meat? The answer? No difference. Say, well, I just said this to somebody and he said, well, kosher meat doesn't have blood because they salt it. Okay, so salt and non-kosher meat. Is it now good? Is it now the same? Oh no, it wasn't slaughtered the right way. What's the difference? Well, people explain because slaughtering it that way is humane. Well, if we're just concerned about the humane aspect of it, then don't slaughter the animal at all. I'm not trying to go down this path. What I'm trying to say is it cannot be just about that. But rather that Hashem dictated that these parts of the animal are kosher, these types of animals are kosher, these types are not kosher. If it's slaughtered this way, it's perfectly fine. If it's slaughtered slightly differently, it's absolutely forbidden. Remember, beef that has been slaughtered not in the proper manner is just as non-kosher as a piece of ham. You understand? There's no difference. People associate some difference with it, but that's really ignorance. There is really no difference if you really come to think of it. This is forbidden, that's forbidden. Now, why is it really forbidden? You can't mix milk and meat. So again, this same gentleman said to me, well, Rabbi, you know that milk's a big guy. Our stomachs cannot process the enzyme. I said, it sounds fantastic. But if you really do a very simple calculation, it makes no sense that can be the reason, even in the remotest way. And I'll show you how. I'll prove it to you. Would you agree? I'm sure you'll agree, not because I'm a good-looking guy. Does it make sense? How big is the Jewish population compared to the world population? Not even 1% of the entire world population. Never has been. If it ever at the best, at the heyday, let's exaggerate and say it was 2% of the world population. And of those 2%, the sad reality is not everybody keeps all the laws and adheres to it properly.
A lot of those.
The way they should. Okay? And yet, from the 99% of the world population that eats ham, that eats pork, that mixes milk and meat, and so on and so forth, people are not dying every day at the rate of, if it was really that bad, people should be falling like flies. But they're not. And the world somehow has been Keeps on repopulating itself. People are living whatever stretch of life they live, whatever span of life they have, eating all these foods. So it's obvious that it's not just that. And it's not like, oh, we have some kind of sensitive stomach. I said that may be a fringe benefit. On top of it, that's not the reason why we do it. Even if it's true that if that's the case, that's just a fringe benefit. The real answer to why we do it is Chukat. God said so. Now, are there some aspects that we can somewhat understand, especially when you go through the different layers of the onion of understanding the Torah? We know that there are 4 general tiers in understanding Torah. There's Pshat, the simple, the basic meaning, right? Then there is the Remez, then there's the Rush, then there's the Sod, then there's the mystical, right? You have the allegoric, the Remez, you have the homiletic. Then, yes, you may find some deeper meaning and explanation, but ultimately there is no answer. Either you accept it or not. The only choice we do have is freedom of choice to choose. Do we want to follow it or not? But for that matter, we have also freedom of choice. Do I want to follow the laws that fit into Mishpatim, which say, for example, thou shalt not steal? I can choose. Do I want to not steal? Do I want to steal? That's my choice. God doesn't technically choice. But in terms of me being able to appreciate and understand it, this is something we can't understand. I'll give you another classical example, which we've not spoken about in the past. Shabbat. The general concept of Shabbat sounds fantastic. And in fact, you can say it fits in, I would say it even fits into almost all categories. A, it's a testimony. God tells us, you will remember that I rested. Okay, that I created the world. That makes sense. Nice, makes sense. I can even now tell you that it's on a level of mishpatim. Because you say, hey, dude, what are you working for? You know, work. You gotta live your life. You gotta spend some time with the family. You gotta relax, kick back. Makes sense. I like that. It's a great concept. Makes sense. I mean, look, any normal civilized country has a day off. Whatever that designated day off for work, a day, 2 days off. You cannot, even a machine needs a rest. Even a machine needs a little tune-up, a little maintenance. You can't. But then the things that we could or cannot do on Shabbat make absolutely no sense. When I say make no sense, I'm not questioning or not doubting it. But on a human level, it makes no sense. And we've been through this. I explained it in detail in the past. So that is the general 3 types of mitzvot that we're talking about. Says the Torah, this mitzvah that we're now going to introduce, Zot, this Chukat HaTorah. This is the ultimate Chukah of the entire Torah. Chukat HaTorah. This is the ultimate Chukah of the Torah. Why is that? So we know that even in the Chukim, and I'm not in any way canceling anything I said up to this point, but the truth is that there was some very, very high level sages, prophets, that did have access, somewhat more insiders access, insiders information to the understanding of the Chukim. However, the wisest man that ever lived, namely King Solomon, he said in reference to this mitzvah that we're going to learn now, Achakma, meaning I tried to be wise, meaning I tried to contemplate it, I tried to understand it. And it is literally a she, meaning this concept was distant from me, it was beyond me. I could not grasp it, I could not get it. Even he could not reach to that. The only one that ever had access, talking about only human being, that ever had access to this information, it says that Hashem said in the Midrash, to you I will reveal the meaning, the reason for this. But that tells us something. To you, to Moses. Yeah. Only to Moses, exclusively to Moses, for Moses, not for him to pass on to anyone or anything. And only Moses knew the meaning of this mitzvah. So this is the quintessential chukah. What is so problematic about it? And what is this mitzvah? So the mitzvah we're going to learn is, let's continue the verse. it says, again, this is the statute of the Torah, which Hashem commanded, saying, speak to Bnei Israel, and they shall take to you, that's to Moses, a red, perfect cow without a blemish, upon which no yoke was laid. Give it to Elazar the Kohen, which means actually that the deputy high priest would have to be the one to offer it. He shall take it outside the camp, and someone shall slaughter in his presence, and then Elazar the Kohen shall take some of its blood with his finger and sprinkle it directly facing the tent of meeting. So 7 times. Here is the main point. Someone shall burn the cow in his presence. Everything in the cow. Its skin, its blood, its flesh, its blood, and with its weights, meaning all its intestines that are inside, not to clean it out like they typically would do with a offering that was put on the altar. And then, as it describes later, they would also include in the fire a piece of cedar wood and hyssop and all kinds of things. This ashes was used later to mix with fresh water, or as the Torah refers to it, mayim chayim, living water, meaning it comes from a well, from a stream that's alive, meaning that never stops flowing. And it was used as a means of purification. It would be sprinkled on one who has become contaminated by means of becoming in contact with a dead body. And it was done as a regimen in a cycle of 7 days, and the 3rd day and the 7th day, and the person will now be pure. And typically this would be done also before the festivals, as everybody had to go to the Holy Temple. It was an obligation for all able-bodied men, so that's typically when this would be done and on a communal, on a commercial level, so to speak. Now, if I was really to understand and try to explain some of the points, some of the reasons for this, then we can somehow relate to it. For example, why a red cow? What is this about the red cow? What is this all about? And why outside of the camp? It seems like it's on some level it's like an offering, yet it's not being offered in the tent of meeting, it's not being offered in the Holy Temple, it's being offered out there. And then it has to be mixed with the living waters. What's going on over here? And it's only specifically to purify one from the impurity, from the contamination, ritual contamination of death. The answer is that this is also an atonement. That's why it had to be done by the priest, by Aaron. Or in this case, it couldn't be done by Aaron because he was instrumental in making the golden calf. It's an atonement for the golden calf. And it makes sense. There's a connection. The golden calf was gold, and it was a cow. This is red. Red is a gold color. Gold is a red color, and it's a cow. It has to be totally burned, just like Moses totally burned the golden calf, totally destroyed. However, that whatever last matter of it that's left is used and put in now that it's become dead matter, totally devoid of its life, now it's put into living water, which represents the Torah. The Torah is told Mayim, the purity, which is the ultimate purity, and brings purity to the world. And that should be sprinkled on the person to get them pure from, again, the ritual impurity of that coming into contact with a dead body. What is the connection between that and the golden calf and the purity? Well, we once explained before, I'll go over to it briefly, that in truth, the golden calf, for the Jewish people, it did exactly the consequence, that is, exactly what the first sin of Adam and Eve, sin of the tree of knowledge, did for all mankind. Initially, man would have lived forever, was destined to live forever. That was the plan. But when they ate from there, now they had a mixture of good and bad, as I'm just quoting from the Torah. Because there's a mixture of good and bad, and we once discussed this, thus now this machine, it can't live forever. There's always a buildup of negative residue, which is going to now, poison,
contaminate,
make that wear and tear on this machine, on this body, and thus man can no longer live forever. Which is what God said to Adam: because you did this, you're not going to go. It's like a punishment, like, hey, I'm going to get back at you. He's like, no, everything in the Torah in God's world is cause and consequence. So it's a measure for a measure means you brought it upon yourself. If you would have been pure, you could never die. But now that there's impurity, the soul and body cannot stay together forever. When the Jews received the Torah, they experienced the resurrection of the dead. It says their souls departed the body and God resurrected them. And this was a new start. After the resurrection of the dead, not only at the end of times when Mashiach comes, but any time God does the resurrection of the dead, you're not meant to die after that. You just like direct life from God. They, technically speaking, they would have lived forever. You would have imagined that would have been an amazing time. The rest of the world keeps on, a cyclical, generational thing where they can come and they die, they come and die, and the Jews will live forever. Because they didn't sin in the golden calf. In the terminology of the Zohar, they now brought down on themselves, again, that negative residue, that filth, thus they return to that. So that's not every time a Jew dies, and there is death involved, and therefore impurity involved, that all goes right back to the sin of the golden calf. This is an atonement for it. Now, whatever I said now, you're like, that makes sense. It makes sense on a spiritual level. You're like, okay, can you show it to me in a laboratory? No. Because if I take any other ashes from the most refined cow, whatever it is, going to do absolutely nothing. It just might make a stain on your shirt. You understand? They do absolutely nothing. So it's obvious that this is a spiritual thing. It's obvious that this is something that, because Hashem dictated, Hashem gave us the formula, and we follow it, therefore it works. But still, it's not an absolute chukah, and certainly does not deserve of what I said before, that even King Solomon says, wow, this is like right over my head, beyond me. Let me guide you to the verse. Look at verse 7 and verse 8. What does it say? Then the Kohen shall wash his garments and bathe his body in water. That means he has to immerse himself now to purify himself, meaning he's impure. The Torah does not tell you to bathe. It's not talking about taking a shower. It's talking about here, ritually speaking, this person is, both he and perhaps even his garments have become impure. And they need to be purified by being immersed in a mikvah. And after that, afterwards he can enter the camp, and the Kohen shall be impure until the evening. That means by handling the ashes and the water, by being instrumental in making the other person pure, in this case even doing part of the process which is burning the cow. And later the next verse says, also the one who burns it must wash his garments, right? Mm-hmm. Okay? And now look at verse 10. The one who gathers the cow's ashes shall wash his garments. You see that? Mm-hmm. You see that? Okay? Again, the person who is actually doing this tremendous service of trying to make someone else pure is here himself becoming impure. Mm-hmm. Not the same level of impurity, because he didn't touch a dead body, but enough that, remember what this means. The consequence of this is, if it's a Kohen, he cannot enter the entire day, he cannot enter the Holy Temple. He loses his chance, his privilege that day, to do any service, okay, to eat any of the holy foods, and so on and so forth. Okay? But he has to purify him. And he has to go through the process of purification, which is a process. It requires an effort. Right? He has to now exert himself in order to do it. This is the aspect of it which is absolutely not understandable. Makes no sense. Mm-hmm. Makes no sense. How can the very same thing, how can the very, very same element make someone else pure, and me, who I am the person who is volunteering my time, my effort, my energy, my spiritual energy, to help that person, I become impure?
It's the same as a surgeon.
No.
He goes, try to make somebody survive. He's full of blood. He cannot go and perform even a service to somebody else until he becomes sterile.
Yeah, but that can take exactly 10 seconds, or every time it takes him to change his garment. Or in the case of a surgeon, he's most likely, hopefully, he's wearing scrubs. Just pulls the scrubs off, and he may be in a suit and tie, and he can go into a meeting right now. It didn't change the person. Understand that over here, it affected the person. It affected the Kohen.
Yeah, even if he washes his body.
He transformed from being pure to being impure. He changed. Something happened to him. This is something that is an absolute chukah. We don't understand it. However, this is something very, very important. This is something very powerful. The Rebbe explains that although we don't understand the reason why, but we certainly, and look at something very interesting. Go back to this verse 2. Does it say this is the statute of the cow, or this is the statute of the Torah? That seems to be wrong. Not the statute of the Torah, it's the statute of the cow, which happens to be the greatest statute in the Torah. The way it's presented seems to be saying that this is the statute of the whole Torah. The whole Torah really stands in this statute. This is only just but one mitzvah, which incidentally, just FYI, for historical purposes, only happened 9 times in the history of the Jews. The first one was done by Moses. And throughout the generations, primarily during the era of the Second Temple, I think they had about 6 then. Okay, because remember, it has to be a perfectly red cow and so on and so forth. And as the Maimonides clearly states, halachically, meaning legally speaking, the 10th one will be made by Mashiach himself. Okay? But they're all connected to the first one. But this is just one mitzvah that happened 9 times in history. And it was used, and they availed themselves of it, but it's not like, hey, this is the statute of the Torah. So the Rebbe points out that what this is telling us is this is the whole statute of the Torah. This is what the Torah is all about. Namely, the chukah aspect of it, which is the part we don't understand and we can't understand and nobody will understand. Only Moses knew. And that is that the way Hashem made it, and again, we don't know why. You go, but why? I don't know. I'm not meant to know. But what we do know. In order to really give to someone else, you need to take from yourself. You have to be ready to give it from yourself. Helping someone else is not just at your own convenience. And you see, that's why not everybody could be such a good person. Because it does require, one, going out of their own comfort zone. And not only going out of the comfort zone, but sometimes even creating certain realities in their life that are actually going to be impacted to the extent that it might be life-changing. Not just temporarily, but permanently. Okay? And it might have even sometimes a more devastating effect than just something superficial.
Yeah, first responders, they experience something like that. They put themselves to help, to help others.
Right, and you ask yourself, you think, wait, but God, it doesn't make sense. You see, we're so used to it. You gave a good example of first responders.
They run to fire.
You gave a good example. You gave a good example that tells us we're used to it. But if we really stop and ask the question, but God, in a just world, in your world, that everything makes sense or should make sense, why is it so that the kindest of people have to put themselves in the most danger? Or to put it in the Rebbe's world, which the Rebbe really instructed us and encouraged us, and that's the legacy that the Rebbe infused in us, and we can't help ourselves, is that of course everybody cares about the state of Judaism. Of course everybody cares about the fact that there are so many people being lost to assimilation and so on. But to stay in your little Jerusalem, maybe in Brooklyn, in your little enclave, in your little shtetl, in your little spiritual ghetto, stay there and say, look, gosh, it's terrible, really, and sigh, and really mean it. You really mean it. It hurts to hear the tremendous catastrophic level of assimilation and so on. To really have an effect, to really try to purify, to change that tide, to reverse that tide, you've got to go out there. But to go out there means that the family, the couple that's going to live out there, they're going to be, first of all, physically away from their family, away from their surroundings, away from their birthplace, away from the place that they're most comfortable in, but even more so spiritually. How many of the Chabad emissaries live in places where not only they will never have a school, proper school for the kids, which typically that's where they would send their kids. They don't have an environment in which their kids which they grew up in, which they would want their kids to grow up in. And as much as, thank God, we are so diligent about giving to our children and really putting in the effort, and thank God they almost always turn out exactly the way we'd like them to in this case of shluchim. But the reality is that you are paying a certain price. You can't run away from that. Right? Because it's still, the kids did not grow up in their environment that they should be. That they're living kind of, but they're not there. So imagine almost like being a fish out of water, but I'm spraying the fish the whole time with water. So it's alive, but it's not in the water. You understand?
Yeah.
So I'm keeping it alive enough, I'm just spraying it with water all the time, but hello, let me get back in the water. Why does it have to happen? I don't know why. But I do know one thing. What the Torah is telling me is, this is the statute of the Torah. This is what you have to do. Do not expect to be able to help someone else when you're just going to stay sitting on your recliner and just clicking a few buttons. Unless, of course, you are wiring a heavy dose of money. That might pay for those that are going to...
Off balance,
Yeah? Okay. In that case, please, I take back what I said. They'll do that, okay? If you're helping a good cause. But other than that, you got to go out there. Mm-hmm. Right? If someone's stuck in the snow, Florida, no. But if someone's stuck in the snow and someone's got to dig him out, you can't stay in your warm living room where it's nice and toasty and hot. You're going to have to go out there. Now, of course, don't be a kamikaze. Put on a coat, put on gloves, put on this. But if something's going to get uncomfortable, you're going to have to work, you're going to have to sweat, you're going to have to get cold, whatever it is. That's the way Hashem made it. And this is a very, very, very special thing, and really tells us as a guide how we are supposed to live our life in general, and particularly when it comes to helping another Jew, and even more specifically when it comes to bringing another Jew closer to Judaism. One has to be ready to sacrifice their own study, their own time of prayer. Of course, all within the parameters that are allowed by Jewish law. It's not an excuse to now wholesale say, oh, I don't have to do anything, I'm helping somebody else. No, we're talking about when you really sincerely want to be studying right now, but there's Jews out there that need the attention, someone to bring them a little back, a little closer to Judaism. We need to know that one has to sacrifice from their own in order to give. Just like the Kohen would become impure while they're trying to make the other person pure.
Absolutely. It's like a Torah. Hashem is the middle, but from that light, the other ones need that light in order to light the other one. And Hashem might put us in a situation where there is absolutely absence of Him. But that's precisely where He wants you to be. Because you need to be a light to others until that light starts to sustain itself.
I like what you're saying, but let me finish with some good news. I actually have to give the credit to Rabbi Jonathan Sachs, former chief rabbi of the United Kingdom, who gave a very nice message for the Rebbe's Yortzeit,
Nice.
the 25th Yortzeit. And one of the things he pointed out, which the Rebbe taught, and he says, opened his eyes, is that ultimately, when someone's giving in the material, the fact is that if you give, you lose something.
Indeed.
Meaning, you gave me, if I have $100 and I want to share $10 with you, I'm out $10 now. Now it's true I'm going to get the blessings later because I'm doing charity, because I'm helping a friend. But we're talking about right now, if you do the math, look, you had $100, now you have $90. You give another person $10, now you have $80. I mean, any child in first grade can do that. That's in the material things. What the Rebbe really promoted very strongly is that in spiritual matter, when you give, even in this case when you give it for yourself, you're really growing. You're really getting more. It's not that you're losing $10 or 10 percentage points from what you have, and later, because of that, you're going to gain. That's called investment for the future, which is business. And it's good for business. You give now, right? You take a risk, you're going to give it. Trust me, God says, I'll pay you back. This is right there. You've become holy. You've become pure. You've now elevated yourself. So the truth is that even though you are giving, you're being affected by it, but you're becoming greater. Or as I said yesterday, we had yesterday the lunch and learn, that the Rebbe told several of the shluchim in the early years, one specific one, I'm just quoting him almost verbatim, that he really, really wanted to come to spend a holiday by the Rebbe. Being away, knowing what a holiday looks like with the Rebbe, and he said to the Rebbe that he wants to be close to the Rebbe. And the Rebbe told him that when you're there, I am going to be there with you. Now imagine, when you're in the Rebbe's shul, of course the Rebbe sees you and you're there. But am I really fully there? Is the Rebbe fully with me? What more, what greater than the Rebbe telling you about you being so far away? And that's a price to pay. It's not easy. It's not a sweet pill to follow, to swallow. For a chassid that really has been there, and now to suddenly not be there, and to be there to help some Jews that maybe don't even really know what he wants from them. They don't understand what this is all about. He has to kind of break them in, and there's always another layer of ice that you have to break, a little thicker, a little thinner. But the Rebbe's telling you, I'm there with you. What greater height can you reach than the Rebbe telling you I'm there with you? So remember, the real lesson of this, and this is why this Parsha is so significant, and now I'm sure you agree with me, it makes sense, is because this is not just, this doesn't make sense. I said, this is the way it is, and this applies to every single mitzvah. Give from yourself, sacrifice from your own comfort, even from your spiritual comfort and spiritual well-being, in order to help somebody else. And like I said, the prologue, the good news, is that the Rebbe says, you're going to anyway gain from this more, and you even never can ever lose. Okay? Shalom.